Hi, my name is Janet Wong. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of New York Live Arts. Welcome. And before... Thank you. Thank you. I deserve that, right? Before we begin, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. Okay, here we go. We acknowledge and pay respect to the Lenape people, the elders, the ancestors, past, present, and coming in the future. We acknowledge indigenous people that may be present right now, and we acknowledge and offer gratitude to Lenape Hoking, where we are right now, the land waters of the Lenape homeland. Thank you. So, welcome to the second Bill Chats of the season, and we have one more coming up on May 20th. I know some of you have tickets already. And it's with two remarkable writers, poets, thinkers, Claudia Rankin and Tracy K. Smith. So that's May 20th. I know, right? Run and get tickets. Tonight we are so very honored to have Oskar Eustis, artist, director, artistic director, pun intended, in conversation with our own artistic director, Bill T. Jones. And on this little platform. I know the ideal situation would be fireplace, comfy seats, cognac, tequila for Bill. But this is what we have, and welcome please join me in welcoming Oskar Eustis and Bill T. Jones.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. Hey, Eric, good to see you. We're really pleased and honored to have Oskar with us tonight. And I've tried not to read it all. It's quite a... Yes. Oskar Eustis has served as the artistic director of the Public Theater since 2005. In the last 3 years, he has produced 2 Tony Award-winning Best Musicals, Fun Home and Hamilton, and back-to-back winners of the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, Hamilton and Sweat. He came to the public from Trinity Repertory Company in Providence, Rhode Island, where he served as artistic director from 1994 to 2005. Eustis served as associate artistic director at Los Angeles' Mark Taper Forum from 89 to 94, and prior to that, he was with the Eureka Theater Company in San Francisco, serving as resident director and dramaturg from 1981 to 1986, and artistic director from 1986 to 1989. Eustis is currently a professor of dramatic writing and arts and public policy at New York University and has held professorships at UCLA, Middlebury College, and Brown University, where he founded and chaired the Trinity Rep Brown University Consortium for Professional Theater Training. While at the Eureka Theater, he commissioned Tony Kushner's Angels in America and directed its world premiere at the Mark Taper Forum. Eustis has also directed the world premieres of plays by Philip Can Gotanda, David Henry Wang, Emily Mann, Susie Laurie Parks, Ellen McLaughlin, and Edward Machado, among many others. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. I apologize for the length of that introduction.
Well, I feel like we've known each other, but just sitting backstage and talking and getting to know something about what is the same and what is different in our lives. I asked Oskar to come here because I was thinking about what does it mean. I know how it feels for me to be a working artist and an artist who is now an administrator. I guess if you call being an artistic director administrative, yes. I wondered how you balance that need, that crazy self-involvement of making with the generosity of spirit necessary to, he's laughing, generosity of spirit necessary to run a place like Public Theater.
Well, I both think I'm not that generous and I'm not that self-involved. I'm going to be interested to hear you. Honestly, all kidding aside, Bill, you're a really, really serious artist. You have made enormous contributions to the field, and your work is just stunning. I am primarily an artistic director who functions as an artist sometimes, to the extent that, except to the extent that being an artistic director is an art, which it kind of is, but kind of isn't. In other words, I figured out relatively young, with some difficulty and bitterness, that actually the thing that I had to offer the world that I think was most valuable was my ability to create spaces and opportunities and situations for other people's artistry to flourish. And that's what I do as a dramaturg, which is sort of the instrument I play in the theater, and it's what I do as an artistic director, and that for me is much more of my identity than the individual shows that I direct. I love directing. I enjoy it. I'm kind of indulging in it a little bit the last couple of years again, because things are going well enough at the theater that I can afford to. But really, for me, the artistic director part of it is much more the selfish part almost. That defines who I am.
Well, fantastic. I was saying to you tonight, that it always seemed from a distance that this venerable theater, the public, always went through these seismic shifts with the change of directorship. Do you ever feel the weight of all those years of wrestling with? Well, maybe you should even tell us, what is public theater, and do you feel the weight of that definition that keeps? Is it changing, or is it the same?
I think it's fundamentally the same. I think it's been the same since Joe started it in 1954. Mm-hmm. It has expanded, it has refined, it has gotten more ambitious at times, but the basic idea, the heartbeat at the heart of the public theater, has always been the idea that the culture belongs to everyone, and that the theater is at its best when it is accessible to the most diverse group of people for seeing it, and it makes stages available to the most diverse group of people to tell their stories from. That kind of stewing place of democracy is actually the most important thing that the theater can do. And to me, that mission of the public has always seemed crystalline. And to some extent, I think that's just because I think it is a really clear mission, and to some extent it's because I showed up in the lobby of the public at 15 years old, having run away from home and living in Soho, and I was like one of those Conrad Lorenz baby ducks. I just decided, this is my mother. And the public sort of imprinted me with what a theater was supposed to be. And it's actually really my career before I got to the public is me going out various other places in the world trying to recreate the public in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Rhode Island, and then finally getting invited back to run the place itself. So I don't think it's changed at all. I think the expression of it has to change all the time. It has to. You have to find, what does that mean now? What does that mean in our circumstances, our moment? What is, what started, is this okay for me to rant for just a minute, Bill?
Please, we love it.
But what started, that first impulse that Joe had was to put Shakespeare in the back of a truck and take it to parks and take it to where the people were and play it for them. And that was a fantastic mission, and we still kind of do that. But also looked at from 2019, one can look and see and say, well, that's fantastic, and it's also sort of colonialist. It's sort of the idea that we are the artists and we have the great art, and because you're so lucky, we're going to show up in your neighborhood and give it to you. So a lot of what we've had to do is sort of refine that and go, okay, how do you take the sting of the one-way street out of it? How do you actually make it a full circle of democratic discourse so that people, and that's what Joe did when he opened the public theater. All he did was Shakespeare until 1967 when he bought the old Astor Place Library, turned it into what's now the public theater. And the first show he ever produced there, the first show he ever produced that wasn't Shakespeare, was the world premiere of Hair. He had really good taste, yeah. But it was, again, the idea, and Clive Barnes wrote that Pap has just swept the refuse off the streets of Astor Place and dumped it on stage at the public. And this
you didn't forget that review.
Oh, no. And it was part of a terrible review that Joe posted in the lobby. He was so proud of it. As he said, so you have to reinvent how to do it. But and you can probably tell from the degree of animation. I love the fact that I'm taking over somebody else's house. I love the fact that it's just sort of like being a drama. I'm not the guy who invented what the public theater does, but it's my job to for those people who know Mormon history in the audience, I'm not Joseph Smith, I'm Brigham Young. I didn't found the damn religion, but it's my job to make sure it lasts. It's my job to put pillars in the ground and try to make sure that it's a permanent part of the landscape.
So, Oskar, you're coming out as a real zealot, a zealot for your form. Well, good for you. I feel like I personally am going through a dark night of as the mystics say, a dark night of the spirit around it. I used to think that the form that gave me an identity, dance, the embodied form, was the cure for all the ails of democracy, all the things that divide us. And there's something that happens, one thing that happens as one stops dancing oneself. There is something that begins to happen. You begin to look at it, and you've been around the block a few times, and you've tried to invent the wheel several times, and so on. That happens. So there is a kind of feeling right now that it's an act of will to keep this place going. And I don't do it alone at all. Kim Cullen, Kyle Maud, and the wonderful Janet Wong, not to mention our staff. There's a lot of people that have to make this happen. What do I have to do? I have to keep the faith, and I have to be the face of the organization. And I have to find in myself, I'm still a working artist. What do I love? What do I want to say? And I don't know about you. You feel that you're a very wonderful speaker, and like I say, you're a real you're a booster for this forum. So I've got to do my own work. I've got to be able to, at a dinner party, talk to people about why it's important that they come and see a 23-year-old who is making their second or third piece ever, trying to express themselves. The good times, when it's very clear, a couple of years ago we were up at Fishkill Correctional Facility. Right. And we were performing, my company was performing, and there were, I guess, 200 lucky guys who had been chosen. I don't know how they chose them. Yeah. They were allowed to be in there. We did the performance. It was very well received. People were crying. My dancers were crying because they had never literally, the first thing we did was go into the audience. I told these two women, please go in, introduce yourself, and then take a man by the hand and walk him down and then back. They were so moved to be, I guess the stuff that they as women saw in the eyes of those men. But that's not the story. The story is, when we did question and answer later, a man said, look, I got to tell my parole officer that I was here. And why is it important that I'm here, that I see this? Now, public theater, the public, a place like this, its identity has been that it is something exclusive, not exclusive, that's the wrong word, but to understand the type of work that is done here, one has to be very patient, one has to be adventurous. It's not designed really to entertain. God knows, I wish we could guarantee that we're always entertaining. So that man, I said, well, you know what? I got on my soapbox, I said, tell them that this type of work is good for democracy because you've got to think when you look at it. You've got to ask all the hard questions, and this is what we need in a democracy, people who can look for truth themselves. So, I mean, that's the kind of sell I feel like I find myself doing. That's true. Yes.
It's not just a sell, you told them the truth.
Yes, but it's not like saying, well, Shakespeare. He helped invent the English language, and we pay obedience to him every time we do a good production of his work. Yeah. And we are even going to do musicals for you. We're going to make you feel good. You know, I envy what's your mission. I envy it. But do you understand what I'm saying? It's a slightly different kind of set of assumptions that we inherited when we came to this space. We're now working on our mission. But that's our DNA.
But, you know, and And I was around, we were just talking about this backstage, in the 70s at DTW, I was around and I sort of was part of the theatrical equivalent. The avant-garde in theater was actually overlapped a lot with the downtown dance and the avant-garde world. And there was a lot wrong with that world. It was, narcissistic and self-regarding and navel-gazing and elitist, and there's lots of smug. But there's something that I have treasured ever since I ripped up my passport to the avant-garde in 1979. But there's something that I still treasure about being part of it that's so important to me, is that was the last time that that I genuinely didn't care what the New York Times thought. Because like every bohemia, a group of artists gathered, and of course it's inward looking, of course it's navel gazing, but you can create a static screen between yourself and the culture, so that the toxic values of the mainstream culture, you have a group, you have a tribe that are helping keep those at bay, so you can discover some other values. And we're in a society where everything gets measured by the market. Everything has a dollar sign on it. And to try to create spaces where you go, there are values you cannot even put numbers on, much less dollars. There are things that matter to the human spirit that, and creating, there's nothing wrong with creating enclaves to protect that. It's like monasteries. And monasteries aren't populist. Monasteries are where people retreat to and develop their literacy and their skill and their spiritual values. And then hopefully you can go and influence the world, as you do. Your work is not insular. And
no, much to the chagrin of my critics. It's not, yeah. But no, and you're really preaching here tonight, Oskar. This is important for me to hear. It's good for the soul, because, like I say, that sometimes I've lost my bearings. I feel like, this is for a younger guy. This is for a younger person. This is for someone, because I want a middle class life. I do, and
And did you set out to get it in a rational way when you became a dancer?
No. Can you believe it? I was born into a family of potato pickers, migrant workers. Wow. I'm one of the first people, not the first, to actually go to the university. And what do you go and study? Modern dance, But no, originally it was going to be, I was going to study theater because I was going to go to Broadway. That's all I knew. And while there, I got ambushed by contemporary dance. Right. But my parents didn't, just remember an older brother saying to me, we hadn't spoken to other, my older brothers and sisters were old enough to be my parents. But he came, he said, he saw the San Francisco School of Ballet on television or something, and he was visiting my mother. He said, "That's what you do?" I'm not a ballet dancer, so, because I didn't want to get into it. I said, "Yeah, that's what I do." And he said, "Can you make any money at it?" Now, this is a man who drove a cement truck, right? And he remembers picking potatoes. So they thought we were these effete little twerps. What are you doing with those white kids, right? But it was the time. You have to bear up and say, no, my values are such that I'm saying. Can you say that to a person who struggles to pay his rent every month? Yeah, well, I'm not going your way. I'm not going your way. It was important. I think it's made me the man I am now, and the questions I have now as well. To be able to say, I want a middle class life. And that is hard won to say, and that's okay. Now, can your art be that? That's the part I want my art to also be that. But many people working here cannot. Their art does not do that for them. Right. It's just a conversation we're having. I don't know what the right way is. Yeah. If I want to get to that, Kim Cullen and I talk about something that used to blanch persons when we first merged with the Dance Theater Workshop, and I would say, I'd like to build a bridge to the commercial theater. Oh my God, that's blasphemy. What are you talking about? Right. People, I don't think quite, since things like Fun Home, Hamilton and all, but you have the Hamilton.
Yeah.
Talk about that phenomena. What does that mean? You have what we all want, what you got.
Well, that was basically pure persistence. Is that from the moment I saw Lynn at the White House performing the first song from Hamilton, which he did in April 2009, I nagged him. I mean, really unbearably, for like 3 years till he finally gave in and said, "Okay, I'll do it at the public." And then we had an amazing time working. It's a great work of art.
He had no. Where was he? Where did he want to perform it?
He was aiming for Broadway originally. I mean, actually, initially, what he said he was doing is it was a concept album. It wasn't a play. It wasn't a musical. It was a concept album. Maybe it'll be a musical afterwards. But he kept saying that to me, and I kept saying, he's just trying to back me off. He's just trying to keep me. I'm going to bother him some more. But then I actually realized at a certain point that it was serving a necessary psychological function for him, because he'd never written successfully the book for a musical. He had actually fired himself off of In the Heights and hired Kiara Hudas because he'd failed to it. So when he started thinking, "Oh, I'm writing a musical," he panicked, because he didn't think he could write the book. So he said, "No, I'm writing a concept album." And by the time he had the first act finished, we could listen to the thing all the way through and go, "You know what? That's a musical. That doesn't need a book." And then we were off to the races. But it's, the mix, because this has always been, the public has always been the biggest of the downtown theaters and the scruffiest of the uptown theaters. It's always been a crossroads. It's always been a place where we've been transferring, Hair went to Broadway. We've been transferring shows to Broadway since the building opened. And Chorus Line, of course, funded much of the public for many years. So that, living at the intersection of the nonprofit and the commercial world is right in the public sweet spot. And it's, as my favorite 19th century writer said, Karl Marx, men make history, forgive the gender pronoun, but they do not make it in conditions of their own choosing. And we're now in a world, whether we like it or not, it is a world of, as we call it, capitalist hegemony. Capitalism and the marketplace have simply dominated the world. And so living that world, from my job, is how can you do the most good? How can you be most effective? And you can't be effective without reaching people. How do you change things? And in order to do that, you have to dance on the contradictions between the commercial and the nonprofit. The monastery is a fantastic place for learning things, but it's a terrible place for changing the world. You have to actually go out of the monastery. And the public's always done that. And we house experimental art, we house new plays, we house cabaret, musicals, Shakespeare, all of it belongs together. And what we try to do is model as an organization that the diversity of aesthetic forms that we work within is the same sort of melting pot where nothing melts that the country aspires to be, where all of these different voices.
So you think that the art can change things, can change the world?
Absolutely, yeah, I do. Sorry.
No, that's wonderful.
No,
wonderful.
I believe it, and I feel like we have some historical evidence. But let me just talk about you for a sec, Bill, because there's a thing that you do that by not only continuing to run your company, but having this position, you give a moral authority and a moral seriousness to the endeavors that you engage in. And part of what happens is I simply trust that dance is important because somebody like Bill T. Jones is spending his life doing it. And
thank you.
And I'm not the only one who thinks that. That's a really important function to just, and it is holding down the faith, and it's against the current of the times. It's saying that, because everybody knows that whatever is making millions of dollars, including Hamilton, that those things are important. But to actually say, no, these things that don't make millions of dollars, these are also important. You can't measure the importance of what goes on. That's an important job, and I think you're doing it.
Once again, you're giving me a good food and encouragement tonight. This, what do you think about this? Generationally, what do you have to say about that? I find I love my staff. I must admit I don't know everyone's names, but people do change and people come and go. Do you find that it's difficult to? Remember, we used to really relax. If your bros, good friends, everybody, we all.
Back when they were our age, yeah.
Yeah. We were all like, we're going to take over the world. We all And then suddenly you look around and you realize Stephen Petronia was in here tonight, and he said, he's got a wonderful place upstate now called Crow's Nest, which is an incubator space. And he said, he called them, those kids, they look at me like, and he said, wait a minute, I thought I was still a maverick young artist. And then what happened? But how do you feel generationally?
I am under no illusion that I'm a maverick young artist, Bill. I feel.
Well, were you though?
I suppose, but I feel every inch of my age, every year of my age has been earned, and I feel I'm 60 and I feel it. And it's not a bad thing, but what it means is that a lot of my focus is on generational transfer at this point. And partly that's about artists, but it's also about institutional leaders. And I have to say, I lost a bunch of staff this last year, 2018, and I couldn't be happier. Maria Goyanes.
So what, they left because they wanted to retire?
No, Maria Goyanes, a young Dominican woman who's been with me for over 20 years, now is the artistic director of Woolly Mammoth in Washington, D.C. Stephanie Ibarra, who spent 7 years running my mobile unit that went to Fishkill, is now the artistic director of Center Stage in Baltimore. Jacob Padron, who was a producer for a number of years, has just taken over Long Wharf in New Haven. And of course, it also means I'm kind of gasping and trying to figure out how to run the place without Maria, which is not easy. But what it means is the plan is working, that not only is another generation taking over, but it's another generation of people who are a lot different than me. It's not another generation of straight white men taking over these organizations. I mean, we're talking about 3 Latinos taking over 3 major theaters on the East Coast last year alone. And I'm proud that they came through the public. That feels like it's a huge part of my job right now, is making sure that when I go, there's going to be a list of people, and Marie and Stephanie and Jacob are on that list, who are going to be prepared to replace me, not only in terms of their experience and everything else, but in terms of their commitment to the values of the public, that there's no danger that the public is going to be, I'm trying now to avoid stereotypes, but is not going to be taken over by the kind of artistic director who decides they're more interested in scenery than narratives or whatever. Its values will continue and hopefully spread, and that.
And what are those values?
Well,
is it a left-wing hotbed of socialist discontent?
How dare you say so, sir? I am not now, nor have I ever been.
We'll get to Julius Caesar in a moment. But,
yeah, okay. No, but the values, look, when I say democratic, I mean that in a relatively radical way. The program I'm proudest of, the most recent program I'm proudest of, is our public works program, which, what we do is we work with community-based art. Oh, yes. I'm glad. I like it too. But Lear de Besnay, this genius woman, founded it with us. And we work with community-based organizations around the 5 boroughs, and we work with them all year long in a very intensive and involved way. The work with them always starts with the question of, we're the public theater, what would you like from us? And the women at the Brownsville Seniors Community Center, the senior program in Brownsville, Brooklyn, the first thing they wanted was a jazzercise class. And we went, okay. And we taught a jazzercise class. And, we brought them to the theater, and they saw other. And then after I said, maybe we could do a little dancing, like, for shows. And so it turned into a choreographic. And then they ended up performing in the first public works show. And last year, they put on their all-female version of August Wilson's Fences. It was great. Or the Domestic Workers United, one of my favorites, Domestic Workers United, which is the union of housekeepers and nannies. What they wanted was a classical play reading group, and because nobody valued them for their minds. So every 2 weeks they meet at the Public Theater, and we read Shakespeare and we read Lope de Vega. We read Spanish and English. And then at the end of this, some of you obviously know this program, at the end of the year of work, we put on a show, a pageant at the Delacorte in Central Park, Free Shakespeare in the Park, the 2,000 seats. And it's got 5 great professional actors in it, and 200 people, many of whom have never been on the stage before, ranging from 7 to 90 years old, this celebratory pageant. And I knew this was great social justice work, right? I thought, okay, this is going to be so good for these people to participate. What I had no idea is the first night of the Tempest, it was the best theater I'd seen that year, just bar none. I have not missed a single performance of a public works show in the 7 years since then, because it's...
Well, what makes it the best theater you've seen?
Because it's proving a proposition. And the proposition is that artistry is not the possession of a small group of people. Artistry is fundamental to being human. Every human being has artistic talent, not only the ability to express themselves artistically, but the need to express themselves artistically. Some of us get to practice at 10,000 hours. Some of us get to do it every day of the week. Other people hardly ever get a chance to do it. Some of us have genetic gifts that are great. Some of us, but it's all just on a spectrum. There's no binary about it. And when you really embrace that and take that seriously, what you can feel, what I feel anyway in the audience every night at Public Works, is this euphoria. And the euphoria stems not just from that there's wonderful work happening, but because you can see manifest a proposition that all of us have way more in common than differentiates us. All of us are much more of a community than we are a series of individuals. And when you see that manifested, and we're not the only work of art that's ever created that feeling, people, that feeling to me is one of the most transformative feelings that I can have.
Yes, and I used to, and I think I can get back there, but it used to be that feeling, give me an open space, give me an open room, and I can rattle the bones, move the muscles, and I can channel what might in my mother's way of thinking would be a Southern Baptist minister, but I think I had that. Now, maybe once again, because the body is aging, I don't know if I feel like my art form becomes more esoteric. And I don't have a problem with esoteric. Yeah. I thought, because I am called populist, but actually I'm a bit of a snob. And I have this value system about rigor, about I do think that everybody has inside of them the ability to express, but I don't think that everybody is able to ask the toughest questions about the nature of perception. And a moment ago, you gave me a wonderful, I hope we recorded that, what you said about what this field is, but there's something about the avant-garde, or something about that work that makes people have to hold onto their seats and makes people angry, and this is not art, and so on and so forth. Well, is that public theater fair? This is not art. This is...
certainly some of my patrons would say so. I mean, it's actually one of the most important things I think I did. Joe was a genius, and George Wolfe, who preceded me, was a genius and just did amazing, still is, and did amazing, wonderful things for the theater. One of the things that he did that I didn't appreciate so much is he hated avant-garde and experimental art. That downtown shit was, I believe,
is that George?
The phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. Right,
and
right.
I love George, and George is immensely talented. But he did not make the public a welcoming place for experimental art. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a real loss. And it's not because, I mean, this is again one of the things that I feel like about the role of the public, is that when the public stops doing certain things it's supposed to do, it's not like that art vanishes. It just retreats to its corner. So when we stop doing experimental theater, it's not like experimental theater goes away. Mm-hmm. It just all goes to PS 122, or all goes to the kitchen, or all goes.
So you don't feel the need to do, quote, experimental theater?
Sure, we do some. I mean, we have. I mean, we do. We don't do as much as we should, actually. But Elevator Repair Service, Oklahoma Nature Theater, Nature Theater of Oklahoma. We've had a number of experimental companies that the Wooster Group did Hamlet. We brought the Wooster Group's Hamlet to the public, which I just thought was fantastic. And every night people walked out. Every night I got screaming letters from people, if letters can scream. I mean, and I thought it was fantastic. And we could have run it for a year. It was completely sold out. And Liz LeCompte, who runs the Wooster Group, said, this has been a really hard experience. I said, Liz, why? She said, so many people don't like it. I said, right. So you could go to the garage, or you can go to St. Anne's, and you'll be guaranteed that everybody will like it, and it's everybody who already knows your work and already likes your work. But here, you're running up against some people who love you and love it, some people who can't stand it and walk out, but when they walk out, they're thinking. And then there's also a middle ground of people who don't know quite what to make of it, but now it's in their world. And that's the function we can offer to experimental art.
Because they trust you. They come there because they trust the theater.
Yes.
They come there,
Yes.
and then they come there and they try something a little outside the
Right.
comfort zone.
Right.
Yes.
And I think that's tremendously valuable. So that's the role I think we have, not sort of the hardcore experimental work, but when there's certain experimental work that I think will benefit from exposure to an audience that doesn't know it likes that stuff. And there's huge victories from it, like happened with elevator repair services, GATS.
I saw it at the public. Yes.
That was just, and there you hit this incredibly unlikely piece. That is one of my favorite pieces of theater of the last 20 years. And again, we could have run it for a year at the public. The audience demand was insatiable for it. And again, it was an audience that had no idea that what they needed was a 7-hour complete version of The Great Gatsby. No focus group would they have said, that's what I want to see. But once it was there, they found out, wow, that's what I want to see.
Should we open it up and let you folks get in here? Would you like to, you have anything to add? Yes, I think we have a microphone there for you as well.
Thank you both.
Hey, Lizzie.
Hi. Oskar, I'm curious what your relationship is to contemporary dance. How often do you get a chance to see it, and when, and if you do, what does it spark in you?
We laid a trap for you with that question.
Ouch. It's really simple. I don't see anywhere near enough of it. And when I do, I am almost always delighted, flabbergasted, in awe. It's some of the most inspiring stuff I can see. When I was younger, I saw a lot more dance, and I don't, and it's a shanda.
It's funny, isn't it, that as one gets older, I used to have a therapist friend who said that there's a conservatizing effect that comes with aging. And she said also success, but definitely with aging, you know your taste more. You have less bandwidth.
Except for what I actually really, really eager bandwidth. What I feel like I've had to do, and particularly since I came back to New York in 2005, is specialize. I've had to say, you know what, my job is so hard, and there's so many things I have to do, and I basically work all the time, that if I allow myself the luxury of going to check out dance, I'm going to be lost. I don't see opera. I try to, and now I'm just totally conscious of the theater that I don't see. But to me, it feels like in order to be really, really good at the artistic direction thing, which is my, chosen path, I have to narrow myself more than I wish I did.
Yes.
So hopefully I'll retire soon and be one of those old people who you don't want in your audience, but I'm really glad to be in the audience.
But you're always welcome to come here, because I think there's always something that I think would be interesting to you, and
I'm sure
we'll
that's
reach
true.
out. And
Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Right there.
So as I listen to you talk about art uplifting democracy and also being the gift of many and not just a few, the idea of Ai Weiwei's definition of art as an invitation came to mind, and I was wondering what you think, as someone who obviously specializes in bringing art to as many people as possible, at the actor level, because that's what I'm in training for right now. What can we do at the lower levels of that chain? Because obviously I can't be an artistic director at 19 almost and
Not
go
yet.
start a show somewhere. But as a young artist, what do you think is our role in extending that invitation to people around the world of both high and low socioeconomic standing?
That's a hard question. So I'm going to refuse to answer it. No. I think a couple of things. And first of all, that as a young artist, your primary duty is to yourself. Because the thing that you are trying to create more than anything else is yourself. Who you are, what you have to offer. And that means you're trying to figure out what your vision is. You're trying to figure out what your skills are. You're trying to figure out what you're not so good at that you need to get better at. You're trying to figure out what your taste is, what you like, and then why you like it. And then you're trying to pursue that more relentlessly than most people do, because that's what's required of artists. Bill says he wants a middle-class life. That could be true. But there was some other shit he wanted more. And he got that. And that's the thing that you have to do. Because if you don't turn yourself into the best possible version of yourself, you won't have that much to offer. So in some ways, you have to be selfish in the sense of self-reflective and looking in and working on that, because then you got something to offer. And then, the only advice that I know how to have is you keep trying to figure out who are the people whose work you really respond to, whose selves you respond to, and who respond to you, and hang on to them. Stick close to them. You need that reinforcement. Mike, the real bio, the bio that we could have given if we were less conventional and more truthful, is just a list of names of the people that I've worked with over the course of my career. And many of them, I'm happy to say, are in their 30th, 40th year of working with me, because when we find each other, you don't let go. And then you try and always align, is the work you're doing actually consonant with what you believe? And if there's a contradiction, what can you do about it? I made some joking references to ripping up my passport to the Avantgarde, but it was a dead serious moment for me. I was living in Switzerland, had been hired by the Zurich Schauspielhaus to come to Switzerland and found an experimental second stage called Das Labor. I was 19 years old. I had a Swiss partner who was a little older than me, but we were kids. We founded this experimental stage, and I was in the German-speaking world for a couple of years, and something was going terribly wrong. And the thing that broke me was an article by Joan Holden, who was the chief writer for the San Francisco Mime Troupe, in what was then called American Theater Magazine. No, it was called Yale Theater Magazine. And she wrote an article about the Mime Troupe, and the first sentence was, "We are a theater that does not hold our audience in contempt." And I read that sentence, and I didn't sleep for 24 hours. Because I realized that what I had actually been doing the last couple of years, particularly since I went to Switzerland, I knew nothing about the audience. I didn't know who I was talking to. I didn't know what I was trying to communicate to them. And that what was really motivating me is I was trying to make art that was so esoteric that they couldn't possibly understand it, so that they would be in awe of me. That was actually the thing propelling my art making. And I just broke, because I went, this has nothing to do with what I believe in as a human being. This has nothing to do with what I think good values are. And like everything else, they tipped the country an end, and everything with a screw loose fell into San Francisco. And I wound up in San Francisco and reinvented myself in the theater in a way that was more consonant with what I actually believed. That was a huge moment for me. And forgive me for the TMI story, but the point being that those are the things that you can, and you don't know where the opportunity is going to be, but just, keep remembering that willingness to care about something more than success, that willingness to care about things more than money. It's not that you don't care about money, it's that we all care about success. But the willingness to figure out, what is it that I'm actually passionate about that will make me get up in the morning, keep being an artist no matter how hard it is. That's what you have to offer. That's the gift you have to give. And figuring out how to follow it is everybody's individual journey. But there's a way, and just because you're young and just because you're an you can make a theater company. You can decide what theater you make. You can find that playwright you really love and then not let them go, which is what I did with Tony Kushner 40 years ago. You can, you can't do quite what I did because I had a theater to run. But, again, literally, guys, you would have been embarrassed if you'd seen me nagging Lin-Manuel for 40. Please, could you come on? Can we have a cup of coffee? Can you talk? No, I really think we'd be good. It's just find the people you believe in and stick to them, because it just it will make you better. So anyway, sorry, that was.
Did you?
Question for both of you. What's the last piece of theater you've seen that touched you, and why? What's the last piece of dance performance that that you've seen and touched you, and why?
Well, I've just been working on a musical called Paradise Square, and though I screamed and shouted about many, many things, there was something about where the show has gotten to, and particularly the lead actress, Christina Soujou, that I was brought to tears seeing her get there and what she had to say to a contemporary audience. And if you have a chance to see it, it's called, the show is called Paradise Square, but that particular number is called Let It Burn. And I was very, very, very moved by that.
I'm going to leave out public theater shows because it just sounds a little bit too much like advertising. But a couple of weeks ago in London, there's a virtual reality project that I've been tracking for a couple of years. It's created the National Theater as this, two containers out in back. Do you know? There you go. Hi. Great theater. And there's two container sheds out in the parking lot that is their virtual reality department. And Rufus Norris, the artistic director, has funded it for the last 2.5 years, and it's just pure R&D. And they've come up with all sorts of interesting things which go nowhere. And they've come up with one show that's unbelievable. And it's completely, talk about experiment, it's completely unscalable. It requires like 5 highly trained people for every 1 audience member. But it's called Draw Me Close, and you put on the VR headset, and there's a narration in your head, and everything is drawn, and there's a house drawn, and you're seeing it from the perspective of a 6-year-old. And you go in the door, and your mother greets you, and there's an actress there. So she's just a drawing in your eyes, but she takes your hand, and you draw on the floor, and then she spills some paint, and she's terrified. And why is she so terrified about spilling the paint? And then she puts you to bed, and reads you a bedtime story. And then she goes in the next room and has this knockdown, drag-out fight with her husband, your father, that you can overhear in the next room, and there's hitting involved, and you're lying in the bed. And I just walked out devastated. It's amazing. And it's the first time I've really seen a theatrical VR thing that really works. And again, it's impossible. You can't do that. You can't have 5 people for one. I mean, it's unscalable. But somebody's going to figure out how to scale something like it that's going to be amazing. And that's that. I was thinking of it partly because of the experimental question. I mean, that's what you can do when you're not trying to make money and you're not trying to please everyone. You're just trying to see, what can this art form do?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
I think as a young artist, a lot of us are kind of at a hopeless place. Not a hopeless place, but less hope than maybe y'all had when you started. And I'm curious about what you think the goal should be for us in like the next 20 years if we're still around.
Well, I think Oskar is really laying it down very, very well tonight. I think maybe the goal is to stay in touch with yourself. I mean, it's easy to say when you're well fed, right? But I think that that's the only thing you can say to an artist.
I guess I'm asking globally.
Globally.
Like, aside from
As a movement, kind of a social movement?
as like art as a social movement, art as like something that is progressing the community forward. Where should we be looking? What should we be doing?
I'm fresh out of ideas about groups. I'm down to the real, excuse the term, the real shit about what's going on with me, the people I'm working with, the people I'm married to, people I know. So I don't know. You have a feeling about, social justice is important to me, but the idea of saying go out and do this, march, what have you, I don't know if I can say anything that's not going to be a bit stale around that. What do you think?
I have more hope now than I did when I started. When I started, I was mostly scared all the time. And I tend to make a big romantic, Elizabeth heard me make the big romantic story about running away from home when I was 15 and living at the Performing Garage, and I never went to college, and look at me. And, I tell it as if it's some kind of like pirate story. And the fact is, I was desperate and scared and lonely and felt completely out of my depth, probably until I was in my early 30s. It took me a really long, but what the advantage I think I had, and some of this was advantage that was just given to me, but I just didn't stop. It didn't make me stop working. I kept looking for what's going to actually work for me, what's going to work for me. And everything that I tried was not very successful. I mean, there were some successes, but I never felt like, oh, I've got it, until I started feeling like I know who I am about my late 30s. I was like, okay, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I have, and I relaxed a little bit. So I don't want you to think that things used to be more hopeful, and now, and I tell you, when we with Nixon and the Vietnam War and what was happening, this guy, the assassinations. I mean, admittedly, this guy is the worst ever, but it looked really bad then too. I mean, it looked, and we came out of that, we survived that. So just, I trust you. I think you're going to find the things that matter, and it's the thing that the hardest thing is, where do you get the courage and the support and the strength to keep doing this stuff, and how do you work out your money? I mean, it's a huge problem. How do you work out your money so you don't have to completely retreat from what you're doing in order to live?
And are you taking care of the people coming up behind you? I mean, that maybe you guys could be out ahead a little bit more, already thinking about the institutions that you're leading up, already thinking about this as being part of a discussion, being fierce, study the pronouns, all of those things which are really the markers of our era right now. You got to show the next group of people how to do it. We have a lot of, those are people my age, I don't know about you, but our parents are dying, if not dead. And there's something, when I'm thinking of I don't have children, but my brothers and sisters who do, the way they have treated my mother, I'm saying, you're telling your children how you should be treated. So for what it's worth, how do you live as an artist? And how do you feed yourself? And at the same token, how do you have enough to share with other people? That sounds like a social movement, but that's really spiritual stuff for each individual. You know, there was a piece I made called Still Here. And Still Here was working with people living or had been living with life-threatening illness. And I went out to do, we were in 35 different cities interviewing and different people. And I asked them to tell me what it took to survive when you are, let's say, a woman with breast cancer, or a man with HIV or whatever. And people, they were very generous, because they, after all, it was not about work for people who were dying. It was actually for the well. And we used to use this terminology, the arrogance of the well. And they said things like, one needs a sense of community. One needs a sense of a higher purpose. That's a tough one, higher purpose. One should set realistic goals and be willing and able to change them. Live in the moment and cherish small things. Now, that's not fortune cookie stuff. Every one of those things there were people who have seen death up close, and that's what they were telling me. So, can a generation do that? Can a generation do that? I know, you're going to show us. Huh? Yeah. Was there somebody on this side? Yes, ma'am.
My question is about taste versus instinct versus programming. And I'm just wondering, I'm so taken by this idea, the model of grabbing on to the people and not letting go and making your career that way. But I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about what that really looks like, and what the difference might be between your taste and your instincts as a producer and as an artistic director.
Yeah, taste is what I think was sort of the first set of things I developed that I cared about and responded to, and you know that was in my youth as I developed that, and that feels like very much me. But since I've been being this artistic director thing, which is going on 30 years now, at different places, what I keep realizing is that I can't program anything that I don't love. So my first job at any theater is to try to expand who I am so that I love more. And because if you try to program what you think your audience is going to like or what you think somebody else is going to like, it's not just that it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, but it's also people smell it. people smell the inauthenticity of it and they don't like it. They don't respond to it. What, the programming that the public does is very different than the program that the Eureka Theater did or the program that Trinity Rep did. But I love everything there, and it's because I've tried to become a bigger person and love more and get enthusiastic about more and learn more, which also helps because saying that your curiosity is a muscle that you have to continually exercise is actually not a bad way to go through life.
But Oskar,
Yeah.
there's this, I know I have said it, and I've heard others say it, that to be a curator or a producer, you must have a Socratic dialogue with your community.
Mhm.
And that means you're trying to lead a discussion by asking questions. And I think Carla Peterson, who used to be the artistic director here, she gave me some tough conversations, but she was saying that she didn't have to like everything that we showed, but she had this view of what the field was and what the ideas were. After all, you realize this is a incubation space.
Sure.
This is trying to get the young. And she said that you have to nurture artists. You look this work and you come back in 2 years and then you try this and she said doesn't have to. I don't know. Did she say it so strongly? I don't have to. It's not all my taste, because taste is very important to her. But I think I've said it. She said you don't have to like everything, but you're having a conversation with your constituency. Your job is to present them with what you think is important part of a conversation. Now that's the language that we use in this world, the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good language. What's slightly different is that feels like it's from the point of view of a presenter, and we're overwhelmingly producers. So meaning that the work that we do is stuff that from the ground up we're making. And if I was a presenter, it might be a bit different. I might feel that I should be, some of this, some of that, get the variety. But as a producer, I don't know how to produce anything I don't really get, that I'm not really passionate about. Except the one other thing I will say is there are whole areas where I know that my taste is insufficient, and then what I have to do is fall in love with somebody else who will pick those. Shanta Thay can program Joe's Pub. I can't, but I love her, and what she does is amazing. Mark Russell can program Under the Radar because I think he's amazing, and then I walk in, I have no idea what I'm about to see. And that's, in a way, getting out of the ghetto of my own taste. But if I'm not in some way passionate, because really what I feel like I'm saying as an artistic director, the contract I have with the audience and the public is that if you walk in here, you're going to see something that I really believe matters. You may not like it. It may disappoint me, but I think it matters, so you're not wasting your time. And that, whether that's right or wrong, that's how I think of it.